Ms. Lofgren.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First, let me say what a transformational few weeks this has been since the murder of Mr. Floyd. I am grateful to my constituents and those around the country who have marched peacefully to raise the issue of justice in our country. I am grateful to Karen Bass and the Congressional Black Caucus, as well as you, Mr. Chairman, for your work in putting this bill together. I think it's important to state at the outset what this hearing is about and what it isn't about. It's really about this bill and how we can improve the state of policing in the United States. I've heard several people talk about funding for law enforcement. We did that when we passed the HEROES Act. We provided funds for local governments to address issues in their communities, whether it's health or public safety. And we all know that it is the local communities that organize their public safety response, not the federal government. However, when there are police, we want to make sure that those police operate in a legal way that doesn't use violence against people who pose no violent threat. And that's why I would like to ask Ms. Eiffel if she could address these two questions. First, we've incorporated the Peace Act into this bill, which basically outlines when the use of deadly force is appropriate. That, coupled with the new standard for unwillfulness that would provide accountability, is my question to you. Will those two measures help prevent violence against people who are not posing a violent threat?
Thank you very much, Representative Lofgren. And I, at some point, would love to and welcome the opportunity to talk about the funding issue, but let me answer the question that you asked. One of the principal problems that we have found in this longstanding systemic issue of police violence against unarmed African Americans is the inability to hold officers who engage in this conduct accountable. Now, this is not just about the individual officer who some refer to as a bad apple. This is about a system of accountability that must exist if police officers are to understand that they cannot engage in certain kinds of conduct without impunity. And unfortunately, all of the legal tools that are available to us to hold officers accountable have been weakened or lack the sufficient strength and language to allow us to do so. So strengthening the language of the federal criminal statute that will not hold us to such a high standard in proving intent of the officer's conduct is critical. And so adding a recklessness provision into that language that will allow us to get at some of this officer conduct is vitally important. What I suggested earlier, qualified immunity on the civil side, is vitally important to removing that defense to ensuring that we can hold officers accountable. I've spoken to many police officers about the culture of impunity around these killings and around these acts of brutality. And they know, just as anyone who is in a system knows, whether they are lawyers, whether they are doctors, whether they are police officers, that accountability is critical to influencing behavior. And unfortunately, our legal system has failed in providing that accountability. And what this bill tries to do is to go into those statutes where the language either isn't sufficiently strong or where courts have interpreted the language in such a way as to remove the power of the statute, to put the tools back into the hands of the Department of Justice, but also private attorneys and civil rights attorneys.
Thank you,
so
Ms.
that they
Eiffel.
can use the law to hold officers accountable.
Thank you very much. My time is just about expired. I just like to note that for many years, African Americans have been mistreated in many cases, in many communities by law enforcement. And the multi-ethnic, broad, peaceful protests that have arisen around our country that have been met also with violence, I think have opened the eyes of Americans across the United States about the need for reform. I think this is an important step forward, and I'm grateful to be a part of it. And I thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.